Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first ever community sessions. You can all thank Hannah for this. This is entirely Hannah's fault. Blame Hannah. It's just Hannah. This is not a Fusion thing, surprisingly, even though it's on the Fusion Tech Meetup. This is the vain attempt. Well, vain. I'm a cynical little bugger. This is actually just trying to get the community working together more. There has been many attempts, and they've all been done their relative amount of success. And this is adding a little bit more to that. So we have a group of panelists to discuss this, ranging from meetup organizers, people who are just old in the tooth in the community, and from all different walks of life. It's not just the people from the tech meetups, from the developer community meetups. It's covering all spectrums of the tech and tech adjacent space. And this one is about collaboration. So literally, we're going to start off talking about how we actually then go forwards, improving and being better. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We do have a code of conduct. So if you were in the chat and you haven't read this before, yes, it's the Fusion code of conduct, but we're still using it because it's a good one. Please make sure you've read it so that you behave well, because everybody wants to play nice and make this something that's successful, and we can actually help the Birmingham community grow. And if, for some reason, you wish to send questions, we are encouraging you, our wonderful audience, to ask questions. Either drop them into the YouTube chat or feel free to tag them community sessions on Twitter. I will also be having James, one of the organizers from Fusion, helping us in the stream, making sure I don't miss questions by just being useful and helpful and good humaning and all that. So I'm now going to start inviting everybody so that they are, part of this, so we can get started. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because it makes more sense than me trying to do it. So first up, I'm going to do it in order that my list has them in. So first up, we have Indy. Hi, Indy. Wonderful timing.
Hi everyone. I'm Indy Pahal. I'm the IT director at Eurofin's Food and Waters Testing UK. So you may have seen me. I've actually been on stage, if you like, for questions or anything, but I've been around the Birmingham tech community for a while now, and that's me.
Excellent. Hello, Keji. Say hi and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm KJ Adedeji. I'm head of product at Talit. We used to be based in the Jewelry Quarter, but we actually, as a result of the pandemic, decided to go fully distributed as an organization. I'm here because I ran a meetup called Product Tank for quite a long time, and then lovingly handed it over to some great people a couple of years ago. So after many moons of doing that, I think there's some things to be added to the conversation.
Nice. Next up, we have Dan. Hello, Dan.
Hi. So I am not creative lead. I am a brand and communications lead at Substract. It's a new role, so I haven't quite got used to saying that yet. I'm brand and communications lead at Substract, and I also co-founded and co-direct Birmingham Design Festival, which started in 2018. And previous to that, I ran the creative meetup at Badigo for about 5 years.
Okay. And next up, it is, do we call him Stuart or Sil today?
Stuart is fine. Hi, I'm Stuart Langridge. I'm a consultant and things, but I'm involved in all sorts of things around the community. I've helped out or consulted or worked with people running various meetups and things around the city. So that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Sorry, dude. You've always been one that's the go-to. Stuart.
Well.
And last but not least, we have Pauline.
Hi everybody, I'm Pauline Roach. I have a new job as Digital Literacy Coordinator in Northfield Community Partnership, which is a small charity in the south of the city. I'm also a freelance journalist and editor of Digital WM News, and I produce and co-present Dr. Tech Show on YouTube on Mondays, and a local radio station called Hope Radio. I do a program there on Tuesday evenings called Tech Talk, and I call myself an amplifier. I work to increase the confidence of people mainly those working in or with community-led organisations to use tech for better lives. I'm a NED for Birmingham Tech, member of the West Midlands Coalition for Digital Inclusion, etc., etc. So busy on the scene.
And last but not least, he's not actually part of the panel. He's here to help me run this thing quite smoothly. It is James, who's there in the background to make sure that I don't miss questions so that the panelists get grilled by everybody and anybody. So,
Hello.
is everybody ready to start?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Right. I think this is a general question that can be asked to everybody. Keep it short, though, because there's no need for a soapbox moment, especially as I'm the cynical person who disagrees with this question entirely. Why do we love/live in Birmingham? Who wants to take that bullet? Because I'm the grumpy one who goes, well, I could do this bloody anywhere. Why should I be here?
I'll take that one first. So I've actually been here 15 years. I'm a Scouser that's been adopted into Birmingham. And I think one of the things I love about being in Birmingham is the Brummy understatedness of doing good things, but just getting on with it, and the community kind of galvanizing around that. I think sometimes more self-promotion in a structural way would be good for Birmingham, but it's actually one of the things I love about it. It's just good stuff happens and people just crack on with it and no one's screaming and shouting and doing a big something dance. It's just good.
I'll add to that. I like it because, again, I'm not from here. I'm an hour from Dublin, from Ireland, but Birmingham isn't such a big city. You can't get easily from one side of the city to the other, or from one network to another. I love the fact that it incubated Civic Square, which grew from Impact Hub Birmingham, which was the only Impact Hub outside of London. I've recently rediscovered cycling, and I love doing that in Birmingham. And I like buildings like the Library of Birmingham. I like Winterbourne Gardens in Edgbaston. And I find the people are generous and diverse, and I love the food you can get here.
I honestly think that I've gone from being annoyed that people outside Birmingham don't get why it's so cool here to actually being quite proud because I don't want them to know about it, because they'll come in and they'll ruin it. Right? Exactly as Casey says, one of the things here is that people do stuff but aren't necessarily bothered about making a big noise about the fact they're doing it. And we might get on to how that's a problem because no one hears about all the amazing stuff you're doing. But probably better to be a bit under self-promoting than to be a bit over self-promoting. And that seems like a very Birmingham way to think. So my adoptive town, I'm very pleased that I'm here.
I think Birmingham has been, in the sort of 10 years that I've lived here, a incredible opportunity to do something new. I think because it must have lingered for a bit with not too much happening. It feels like in the past maybe 15 years, there's been a massive surge of really cool things happening. And that goes from cultural stuff all the way through to cuisine. In the 10 years I've lived here, the food offering has grown dramatically. People have changed their thoughts and views on how they perceive Birmingham. And as a result of that, I think just everything has become a little bit more fun, a little bit more inclusive. And the opportunity is there because all of this stuff feels relatively new. There's lots of things that you can start new. So I wouldn't have been able to start a design festival anywhere else really other than Birmingham and have it become a success, but also be a completely new thing as well. So that's something that I found very exciting. And I think that will continue for the next few years as well.
So I think I might be the only person on the panel that's actually was from Birmingham but doesn't live in Birmingham anymore. Yeah, so I grew up in Birmingham, and it's actually amazing. I mean, when I finished university and I was looking for a job, there wasn't that much going on in Birmingham, and as everyone else alluded to, the amount that's changed in the last 10-15 years and some of the events and things and that are happening. I mean, you kind of can't keep on top of some of the stuff that's happening, which is great. I didn't know about Dan's design event until literally today, and actually I don't think maybe that's a bad thing of me, but that is, learning about new things and new things that are happening and new community things that are happening is a really great part of being in the Birmingham tech community, and from being, then you have all the food and everything else, which is great.
Okay, so we officially have one Brummie helping support Birmingham in this week. That's a fantastic start. We like Birmingham because it's understated. It's understated because there's hardly any Brummies here. This is oddly enough sounding like the London problem, where when you're in London, nobody's actually from London.
Well,
But
I'm just down the M40. I'm not that far. I'm Banbury originally.
Okay. Well, it seems that everybody has like a personal, deep-seated reason why they love the city. It's not just a because I'm here. There are actual reasons for it, which is always a grand start. But as we've just realised, Indy didn't realise there was a design festival. I wasn't aware there was a product tank until just before the pandemic, because I was aware of Product Tank from London, but I didn't know there was one in Birmingham. So it leads me to believe that we are a fragmented community of people. Like the Birmingham Python, is it the Python Mongers, I believe is their name? Feel free to correct me, Stuart. Used to be based at, is it the Blythe Business Estate?
I believe so.
Yeah. The furthest they could get away from dealing with actual people as they could possibly get while still being inside of the ring roads. So we have a very, very fragmented community. Does anybody see any like benefits to that? Or even the drawbacks are quite obvious. Nobody knows anybody else or talks. But are there benefits to this? Oh God, we have a general. Like,
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's benefits to being fractured. There's only benefits in coming together and learning more about each other. I can't see much to celebrate about not knowing about things and not knowing about each other.
I don't think there's anything to celebrate about having lots of different silos where no one talks to one another. And to be fair, that's not deliberate. I don't think it's just the way it's worked out. But one thing it does, in theory, do is it makes people feel somewhat empowered to do their own thing without having to feel like they're checking in with someone else or stepping on someone else's toes, because there is no one in charge, and that's probably a good thing. We don't really want people to be in charge of all this. There should just be lots of things going on. So this is you've been given a cloud, find a silver lining way of looking at it. I'd happily sacrifice this problem.
I think the fragmentation gives more room for diversity and independence, and the ability to start things without worrying about, as you say, Stuart, people looking over your shoulder. I think there is a certain amount of isolation, and I think some people leave Birmingham to find the community that they feel they haven't got here. And it ends up then with too few people taking on leadership roles, especially those who are underserved by in other areas. So yeah. I'd like to see more of that. I mean, of the people on the call here, I know Keji, I know yourself, Daniel. I've been to one of your events, but otherwise I don't know people. But I know loads of people from going to events at Innovation Birmingham, Silicon Canal, all the social events that used to be. I haven't taken part so much since lockdown in online events in this community. I've taken part in events around the world, really, because I can now,
Yeah, if we're going to be online anyway, if we're forced into doing events where we have to talk to one another while sitting in our own living rooms, there's no real necessary reason to limit it to a specific place. So you've got the flexibility to do other things. But I like the fact that we can still do this, and we're all here. Well, most of us are here, Indy, but so we can have this conversation as if we were sat in the pub or in a venue or something along those lines.
I think the fragmentations thing is interesting. So from doing Birmingham Design Festival, we founded Birmingham Design, which was essentially a community to help curate the design things happening in Birmingham. I think something that we got quite frustrated by was that those sort of more siloed communities in Birmingham Design as a whole weren't conversing with each other. So you would have meetups popping up on the same dates, or people setting up an event where there was one that already existed that worked really well. And that's always like my number one tip is don't do an event that someone else already does really well. And that was happening quite a lot. And all that really happens there is the community gets fractured. You split audiences. You end up with 2 events with half the people out, or one of them just doesn't take off, and you end up with disenfranchised hosts who could have been doing more but have just gone, oh, it's not for me. So we wanted to try and address that by creating Birmingham Design. So that is sort of a space where people can come together on a Slack community. There's a website where you can check things. And the idea behind that was that we would bring in everybody's events together under one thing, or one place where you could view it, and try and stop that fragmentation a little bit and get people talking more. So if I want to put an event on a Thursday afternoon at the end of the month, I can check and see if there's anything else happening. And if there isn't, I can put it on. But yeah, we've just got too fed up of that happening. Thursdays and Mondays especially were really annoying, and it would be like, oh, are you coming to my event? And you're like, well, sorry, I'd already said I was going to that person's one. And we're not quite a big enough city where that's okay. Like, it's not like London where you can just have like 20 events happening and they'll all be full. Like, if there is one design event happening in Birmingham, then most people will gravitate to that. And if another one pops up, there's not a big enough audience to kind of go between the two. Or there should be, but there's not a big enough event attending audience to go between the two.
What bothers me about events like that, though, is how do newbies get included and involved? I think it can feel very isolating when you're starting off, especially in my field with small charities. You know, people who are just starting to explore the idea of technology and digital. I think it can feel very scary for them to come along to certain events. Now, I've been to one of Keji's events, the Product Tank events, and I found that very welcoming, because I think Keji made a point of making people feel welcome and reaching out to them. But some events can be a bit, we're okay, we know the people here, and we don't really want any new people involved. So let's talk about that.
I think paradoxically, larger things, so something like Fusion, for example, where there's 100 or 150 people there, are easier to attend if you're new to the thing, because you're semi-anonymous. There's lots of other people there you're not necessarily expected. Whereas if you show up to something and there's only 15 people there and they all know one another, it's terribly nerve-wracking to walk into this kind of thing and introduce yourself to people who you've never met before. So I don't know whether that means we should have more large events, more small events. We should do better at introducing people. But yes.
I think it's the hosting and kind of buddying up and sort of recognizing that if new people do turn up, it's a bit scary for them, and we need to reach out more.
Yeah, our tactic, because I had co-curators, so the tactic was to split up and do exactly that. Someone would be on host duty and everyone else was kind of like, make sure that we welcome new people, and we did pay particular attention to that. I think because we were smaller, and when you have a few regulars that come all the time, yes, we want those new people to arrive, but it can be really, even in a small event, I think, or a big event, it can be really off-putting to see those kind of groups of people who obviously know each other. So I think paying attention to, I guess it's harder in big events, but paying attention to how do you spot your new attendees, how do you make them feel welcome, how do you engage them in the conversation is really important.
And what's interesting about that, I think, is, so to build on Dan's point, for tech events, we built the calendar, which is calendar.birmingham.io, which has as its goal listing all the tech events going on in Birmingham, precisely so you don't have conflicting events, so it's not just for event organizers, but for event attendees. They can see what's going on. I think that sounds interesting. I didn't know about that. At the moment, it's sort of on hiatus because things went weird during lockdown and people stopped running events. So there's a whole bunch of technical stuff that no one cares about other than me. But I think that sort of elevating the fact that things are going on, and then, KG, exactly as you say, when people get there, helping them become part of this small community, seems like a sort of a two-step process almost.
Absolutely. And we always found the calendar really useful, because with an event like Product Tank, I think our target audience probably existed in different groups, community groups. So, product people can be designers, they can be technical people. So it was really useful for us actually to see what else is going on when we're having an event. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a product event. We're looking at what engineering and developer events are going on, what design events are going on, and then making that choice to not conflict, because actually we had a bit of a broad a broad base that we were seeking to address, not just saying, oh, we don't want to clash with another product event. I mean, not that there were many at that point in time. Anyway, yeah, but I always found that a really useful tool.
And I think it's good that the way Product Tank had, at least the last event I was at, had a kind of different level of sessions for people. So one of the first sessions I went to was an explainer of what product is, you know, and how, because if you're new again in the field, the language can feel a bit exclusionary as well. Again, in small charities, we don't talk about the same things that you talk about, but we need the same support, and we need some of the same support, and we need tech people, you know, involved in charities to help us run our business better.
Does that mean, okay, so generally like making communities feel more welcoming? This is a problem that all tech communities have been suffering with and trying to deal with for years now. Everything from being more inclusive in certain more dominated fields, or just encouraging wider diversity of attendees, just to get more people into the communities engaged. So great, when those people turn up, we can usher them around. I know Andy and the guys who help run Fusion try doing that at Fusion, but it's a bit difficult when there's 150 people trying to find their way to cupcakes. But is there a way that we can strengthen that communication between the meetups? The calendar is one example where it provides a giant signpost when the real world is functioning as it's meant to be, of where things are and what's going on immediately. But is there other stuff that we can do as people in the community that want to help grow it to just usher them around?
I think this is quite a good first step, because, you know, being able to have people who run multiple meetups, albeit me, I'm not one of those, but if you have people running multiple meetups able to have an open conversation like this with input from the community, I think this is a really great idea and a great first step towards doing that.
I think one of the hardest things in terms of talking about collaboration between hosts and those communities as well is almost all of us do it entirely in our spare time. So much of our day or our nights are spent working on our own thing, that it is hard to put your head above the parapet and actually see just exactly what else is going on. And we do have a sort of a smaller downtime between June and probably November where we aren't quite as heavily involved, where we do try and, or the plan is to try and reach out a bit more. The last year has kind of scuppered that a little bit, but the plan was to try and reach out a bit more and build some of those partnerships. And we've done a lot of the partnerships we have built have tended to be more with our own community in mind. So building networks with potential sponsors and things like that have always been where that energy has gone. There's no reason it shouldn't go into to conversing with each other though. But yeah, I think that it will be a universal issue for everybody. It's just, where do you find the time that isn't devoted to your own community?
And I think that
thanks. I think identifying similar communities of practice around what your community is a good way to bring other people in and make other people aware. So, for example, in Product Tank, we often had sessions where we'd invite someone who was not a product person to come and talk to us about how product impacts them. So we had designers, we had engineers, we had CTOs. And that visibility to their networks then kind of shines the torch on, well, actually, this person's speaking here. I think there might be something of value for me in that community too.
This is not the first time this conversation has come up. So there's a Slack with a bunch of people who run different meetups on it, with the absolute intention of fostering conversations between hosts. But honestly, as Dan says, the issue I think most people run into is finding enough time to run a meetup yourself is difficult on its own, without then saying, and please put in extra effort to coordinate with other people or to communicate with other people. And it's a good idea. No one goes, I don't think we should do that. Everyone thinks it's a good idea, but then you say, okay, who's going to actually do some of this stuff? And no one has any time. I mean, I'd love to do more, but it's a question of going, okay, which thing that I'm doing do I give up in order to do this? Someone wants to pay me to work on this, I'll do it. Cool.
One of the groups I'm involved in is the UK Tech for Good organisers, and we have recently come together as a formal in that we're a more organised body, and some money has been found from some fund, I don't know where, and we are meeting more regularly. So Tech for Good groups, people who organise Tech for Good sessions, like I was doing with NetSquared Midlands, are now meeting and offering each other support on a regular basis and talking about going on a retreat and stuff. So that sort of organisers meeting up to kind of offer each other support, I think is really important, and I'd like to see more of that.
We actually have a question from the audience which kind of goes into this, because we're all pointing out the fact that we have great things and we have great ideals, but to be brutally honest, we're all human. We only have X amount of energy that we can spend on any given thing without dying, unless we want to pay Stuart, it seems. So this is a question from the audience, which is, what do you think you're doing really well with the Brum tech scene that should be replicated in other parts? Personally, let's try and keep this towards Birmingham and the greater Birmingham area, because we have things like Worcester, etc. Leamington has a massive overlapping in Coventry of communities. Which bits can we replicate out to them, or more importantly, which bits can we steal? Who wants to bite that one?
Well, one of my favourite groups at the moment is actually on LinkedIn, would you believe? And it's called More Diversity Tech Brum. And it's just a group of us who, kind of send each other messages from time to time. Drew Curry, Alex Cole, and people like that are involved in it. It's good to share what kind of we're doing, and to kind of get each other to boost each other's situations or share resources or whatever. So that's one of the things I'm enjoying the most.
Wow, LinkedIn not being used for marketing, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
Sorry, cynical. I did warn everybody at the beginning. I personally, I do actually have an in on this, in the fact that there are small and niche communities like Worcester Source and Len Geeks, where there is some natural overlap. There are many of those attend the developer events in the city, or I know some of the guys from Worcester Source have been to Product Tank now. But I still don't see any way, anything that's we're doing fantastically in the real world community that we can share. And I'm wondering if we actually can take from those small communities where they're a lot more tightly knit, and ours are slightly more nebulous, I think would be a good way to describe it, where it's a meetup you just turn up to, where we don't actually get involved with it beyond that.
But I mean, this is a big city. Right?
It's not that big.
In fact, as Pauline says, you can walk from one side of it to the other, and I really like that. I live here for a reason. But equally, it's a big enough deal that there isn't, and we probably shouldn't try to create one scene that everyone's a part of, because there are a bunch of fundamentally different things. I don't want everything to be isolated from everything else, but it's probably also not the case that there's one umbrella that everyone's under.
I think different communities have different goals, and it depends on the progression of those communities to what your goal is. I think 10 years ago, we'd have never been able to start a design festival. And just for context, in 2019, we sold 10,000 tickets and we had about 5,000, 6,000 attendees. And that was in year 2 of the design festival. So it's not like it's been running a long time before getting, a really strong attendance. But even 5 years before that, we would not have been able to run that. We were doing really well with sort of smaller focused meetups that then evolved into events that had a bit more structure, that had talks and exhibitions and things like that. And that then evolved into the design festival, which was a bringing together of all those different siloed events. In 5 years' time, it will be different again, and the design festival will probably have to change shape to accommodate the people coming into Birmingham that want something different. There'll be people moving up from London and from elsewhere that want something a little bit different, and that's what we've had to respond to. So the smaller communities in the city that are way more niche than a broad topic of design have different challenges as well. So I don't know that there's a one size fits all thing for them, but we can pass on those learnings for what we did as we grew. We got to a certain point with our meetup where it was very, very successful, but it had been at that level for too long, and the people who made it successful were sort of dropping out or they weren't attending, and we had to evolve it to encourage those people to come back and be part of the community again. So it's the shared learnings of those experiences that we can pass on to the smaller groups, but not necessarily copy what we're currently doing and give it to them.
I think the infrastructure is important as well. Like, I mean, Civic Square, as I say, grew out of Impact Hub Birmingham that was based in Digbeth, and I think that was there for 5 years, and I think that gave a lot of groups, not necessarily the mainstream groups that you're more familiar with here, a grounding and a place to call home, and it was very diverse. And gave people opportunities to go to things and set up things that they might not have otherwise. And they ran loads of events and loads of meetups met there and all that. So that was really positive. And the other infrastructure, of course, was Innovation Birmingham. Lots of events there. I mean, the Tech Wednesday has been a kind of standing item in my calendar for many years. I'd like to see more diversity. It seems that that you get a lot of young men, white men often doing the talks, and I'd like to see them reaching out to the more diversity of the community. But it's good that it's there, and those kind of infrastructure things can't be underestimated and should be supported.
I think the maturity level of the community of practice, if that's what it's for, over time also influences what happens to the events. So, when Product Tank started, product was still, I guess, quite fledgling as a discipline and was only on its trajectory from there. So having been to that, joining product and then getting on a train once a month for 14 months to London, because it was the only place I could find people who were doing what I could do. And I thought, they are in Birmingham, but because of the maturity level of the audience in terms of that discipline, it took time for the event to build up. And then the needs change when those people who have been there from the beginning are getting more advanced and more mature in their career as well. But then you have to strike that balance between growing with that maturity, but inviting the new people in and making sure that they have a place to start as well.
But I think that's interesting. Almost everyone has brought up the idea of evolving what they do to something new, whether that's Impact Hub becoming Civic Square, or Bad Ego becoming Birmingham Design Festival, or just handing off the Product Tank meetup to someone else. And I think we've seen quite a few things where someone does it, it's basically one individual person's thing. They run this meetup and then they run out of time, or they get a new job, or they do something terribly betraying, like move to London, and their meetup sort of folds because they're not there doing it, and ensuring that kind of continuity is difficult. But there's a bunch of examples here of people who have managed it, and maybe that's something we should talk more about. How did you do it?
Yeah, how did we? The longer term events and structures that people are aware of. How did you keep them alive? For example, Brum.js. I have spoken at 3 different iterations of it, run by 3 different, completely different sets of organizers, which had no time or anything to do with each other. There was no graceful handover. There was, it disappeared for 12 months and came back with somebody else running it. So how do we keep these things alive? I personally used to run a conference, which I happily let die 3 years now, just because I didn't have the oomph to do it anymore. It killed me. So how did you hand it over? Because Product Tank, I believe they're still doing it online at the moment.
Yeah. It's the pandemic here has been the most. 18 months has been the most productive in terms of the consistency and frequency of the events. Actually, the pandemic's meant that we've been able to attract people, as we said earlier on, that aren't necessarily Birmingham based, because you can go to an event anywhere. But as far as that transition, there's before the transition came the letting go. It was like my baby for a long time, and its fortunes rose and fell with whatever was going on with me, really. And it was that acceptance that, like, this thing is important. I think it adds value for people who attend it. You have to bring the community along with you. So every single member of the organizing team now is somebody who found Product Tank and became a regular and wanted to get involved. And one of the founding principles of Product Tank is it's for product people, by product people. So in every single event, we are inviting the community to, come and curate a topic, or come and talk, or come and sit on a panel, or let's do an alternative format, bring a workshop to the table. And it took a while to get people actually into doing that, but the consistency of that message, I think, seeped through. So Neve, Neve and Janice came on, and then towards the end of my tenure, Matt joined, and he was quite a newbie actually, and just really valued what the community was giving him and wanted to keep it going. So I think engage and bring the community in at every single point.
And have you been getting people, Keji, from outside Birmingham at events in the last 18 months? Yeah.
The online formats have really been able to pull people in more widely. It's more convenient. That kind of, I'm sure we'll get to the topic of the impact the pandemic has had, but there's the post-work, what's going on in life, but trying to get to events, and we found that going away has really helped. One of the things that I think the Product Tank structure does really well, though, is that kind of what we're talking about here, but because there are an organization whose role is around growing product communities, they've done a really good job of really engaging the different branches. So it started in London in a pub, and now there's about 200 of the things across the world. But actually what we do really well is the organizers in the different branches talk, share resources, and they've created good mechanisms for us to do that. So ultimately, someone does a talk somewhere in Europe, and we can be like, hey, we'd like you to talk here as well. And the pandemic made that really easy, actually. So that's been good.
One thing I'm really excited about that's coming up, just because I was looking it up, is that Hack the Midlands is due again in October. And I've got the T-shirt on from a previous hack. And that was one of the most interesting and exciting things. One of the questions Hannah talked with us about before this event tonight was about working more with students. And I think everybody, what a hack is like. You go for the weekend, you sleep under the table in a sleeping bag or not. You drink lots of coffee, you eat lots of snacks, you pick up the merch and all that. But it's fun, and I'd like to see more of that kind of thing, and I'd like to see us supporting that and encouraging other people to go to things like that, because that's, for me, that's where the genius starts.
I mean, we used to have hack fronts as well. Right?
Yeah. Oh, Mike's hiding now, is he?
I feel horribly seen.
But yeah, I think doing that kind of thing, it's as you say, it's kind of a student engagement thing, because I mean, I used to have that kind of thing, but my days of living for an entire weekend on pastries from Starbucks have probably passed now, if I'm honest. But yeah, doing more of that. There's a bunch of stuff like that going on, which I'm not particularly well tapped into, and I'd like to feel more aware of what's going on in that sort of space, like you say, with things like Hack the Midlands. Well,
I'm finding, Stuart, that because I'm doing this show on a Monday, Dr. Tech show on YouTube, I'm researching, as a journalist I am anyway, obviously, but researching what's going on around digital literacy, digital inclusion. So I'm picking up things that are going on a lot more, and I'm finding it great to just to know what's going on, and a great way of keeping involved. And which is one of, I did, when I was preparing for this show, I did some top tips, and one of my top tips is to use Twitter and LinkedIn. LinkedIn might be a bad word to some people, but I think it has found its feet in the pandemic. No, don't make faces, Mike. And teaching people how to use it properly, you have to use it well, I think, is something I'm looking forward to doing.
Yeah. To the original question of how we keep going, So that's because I think that's really interesting, and I think that is why so many communities finish, is because the driver finished for whatever reason. It's usually something along the lines of growing up and starting a family. I was kind of fortunate that I did that before I started doing all this stuff. So now I'm relatively unhindered, I say, with 2 one-year-old twins in the next room. But I think that's something that we're very conscious of. We've got an amazing team of people that work with us on the festival. A lot of it's driven by myself and Luke, but we delegate a lot of stuff to the team that we just can't fill our brains with, and that's so immensely helpful. And that team's sort of changed over the last few years. We pick up people who have become a big part of the community, whether that's through volunteering. We get about 80 volunteers from BCU every year, and sort of add to the team like that. I guess the big question is, what would happen in 5 years' time if Luke and I just decide we can't do it anymore? Because I don't think the festival in its current form doesn't work without both of us. We've both got really, really complementary skill sets. I should say Luke's the other co-director. I don't know if I mentioned that before. Luke Tong is the other co-director of Birmingham Design Festival and Birmingham Design, and we've got completely complementary skills. We are almost polar opposites in everything that we can put into BDF, and that's why it works so well. And a lot of that stuff we could pass on to other people, but I just the skill sets are so unique. My day job is I work with arts organisations creating digital products. So that entire side of what we do is kind of covered by me for free. And we've got some amazing designers on our team, but they probably wouldn't be able to pick up the website work that I do from a development point of view, as well as a design point of view. And equally, Luke is so well connected with the industry that if we lost him, we'd lose that. So I don't know what would happen if that. We'd have to find a way to evolve, and we'd have to find a way to address that. But it's a perfect example of a thing that could end up just falling off the cliff because one or both of us couldn't continue.
I think one of the things that is often difficult to see is the fact that you guys are individuals with that drive and that unique set of skills makes you very good at running these things, and they're not easy to come across other people like that. And I think it is a compliment to yourselves, and also it's one of those things where finding the next set of people with that drive, with that set of skills to get running is tricky. But it's important to cultivate it, right? It's important to try and find them, but it's not easy.
That's an interesting thing. I hadn't even considered until KJ and you have just mentioned it. Actually, how do you cultivate the next set of organisers? So I'm quite lucky in the past that I have had the great pleasure of helping to start multiple student hackathons across Birmingham in the UK. And they've all had horrible transitional states because, well, students, they're there for 3 years and then they're gone. It's literally how it works. They kind of disappear into the ether. And they've had a huge struggle making it move from one meetup to the next. And those are the people with the same mindsets, the same their lives are essentially clones of each other in the broadest of senses. They don't have huge differing things that you can have as, how do I put this politely, adults. So how could we, if people who are living the same lives day in, day out, and they can literally just go, here, the year behind me, here are the tools and the things we've done for the last 3 years. How do you make it and go forward? How do we find, cultivate, and grow those individuals that will become the next organizers? So at some point, we're all going to grow old and die, saying our meetups survive for another 30 to 100 years. How do we encourage the next generation of people to do it? I'm assuming, Keji, you had people who were just naturally involved. They were naturally talking. They were wanting to do it to begin with. It wasn't a case that you had to foster everybody individually. They were being engaged and involved.
Yeah, I think so. If I think about Neve, for example, when she came on board first as a speaker, and from there, kind of getting to know her, it was apparent she was someone who really enjoyed and valued what she was getting from Product Tank. So on one hand, it's about, as I say, from the get-go, really engaging the community, making sure that message is repeated. It's not a thing you say once and people remember. It's having that open invitation that this is not a thing that belongs to us. To me, it's a thing that belongs to us. So if you care about this, if it's valuable to you, you're part of it. But then the second part is, really dipping into the people who've engaged in some way. So someone's reached out to ask some questions, the people that you've engaged to speak, maybe someone gave you a space once, and really pulling those people and nurturing those relationships, and something typically falls out of that. So everyone who's now a current curator at some point either spoke or just helped out once, and then from there it grew.
Well, I'm going with the fact that the next people to run Fusion will probably be Indy and his generation of organizers. Due to that, he's been dragged into it more than once. But have you seen that, Dan, with people wanting to actively get involved? Have you been considering fostering people?
Yeah, I mean, so the fostering thing kind of happened naturally, and that was the first thing that really happened. Like when I first took over Bodigo, which is the first community I ran, there were people that were attending Bodigo that naturally, after a few months, I was just like, look, you're really great. I love that you come every couple of weeks. Do you want to help me run it? And I've got some ideas for some events, and it would be good to run them together. And that's that. So Andy, who's currently on the BDF team, he was the first person I did that with, and there were a couple of others. And that's the same with BDF. We met everybody that's part of Team BDF. We met via something like Bodigo, and then brought into the team. And equally, it's come on from people being very actively involved in the BDF community. I think what is quite hard is saying no to people. We get a lot of people ask to be involved in some way. And some of them are genuinely because they really want to be involved. They love what we're doing. And then others love the idea of having their name attached to something that gives them a lot of self-promotion. And that's not just people who want to get involved. That's also people who set up things, set up events, seeing maybe what we've done or what other people have done and gone, that's a really good way for me to get my name in creative review because it's happened for them. And not actually thinking, we did BDF not to get in creative review. We did it because we felt there was a need for it and we were really passionate about it. So it's trying to filter out those people. And then it's just creating a space for them as well. Like there's people, we probably have had over the years, maybe 20 to 30 people asked to be involved in BDF. But what would those 20 to 30 people do? So much of the stuff lives in myself and Luke's brain, and the stuff that doesn't lives in a sort of handful of other people's brains. I wouldn't want to bring someone into the team and then have absolutely nothing for them to do and then become really disenfranchised and feel like they're just a spare part if they're really, really keen on being involved. So we've had to be quite careful with how we add to the team. And it does mean disappointing quite a few people because there's just not room for them to do something. The best way to be involved, we always say, is just to volunteer. And I think that's how we do meet the people, is they volunteer for a couple of years. We get to know them a lot better and we get to know their skill set. And then we go, okay, you would actually be really great at managing the new volunteers. That's the best way to get involved in those communities, is not go directly in thinking you're going to help run it. Go in thinking I just need to slowly establish myself. And that's how it worked for me with Bodigo as well. I went to Bodigo for 2 years and then took it over. I didn't just come in and be like, this is fun. I enjoyed my first week. Do you need help running it?
Oh, before I forget, we actually have a... Oh, sorry, Pauline, after you.
I was just going to say, though, I think it's good as well, though, to encourage people, if they want to say something, give them, let them do a lightning talk. There's a group called 300 Seconds that has set up particularly to offer women and other underrepresented groups, 300 seconds to do a talk on something. And there's the other one, Pechakuchi.
Pechakuchi, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. To just kind of get people on the on the platform in some way, encourage them.
I mean, this might be a distinction between design and product-based events and the more hardcore engineering-y sorts of types, but it's speaking to people who run engineering types of events, it's quite hard to get people to want to talk. You've got people who've got a bunch of ideas, but they're reluctant to stand up and speak. And then you've got there are other people who do a lot of public speaking already, but there aren't that many people like that in the city in engineering. So, and no one wants, the same people at every event. So, encouraging new people into it. I was quite surprised to hear basically all of you go, yeah, our problem is that maybe we've got too many people who want to help. Really? Goodness, what a terrible problem that must be to have. I don't know how you cope. Really, I don't. But I think finding people to talk at some of the meetups has often been a bit difficult because you say, okay, if anyone would like to talk, we'd love to hear from you. And the whole audience, just 30 or 40 people, however many who are there, will hear that and say it. But then you don't actually get any voluntary stuff. A lot of it's done on personal relationships with whoever currently runs things. It's like, will you do a talk? I know you're interested in talking about this. Will you do it? But if you don't know that, it's hard to push people into it.
I don't know. I think with talks, you're right. You say participate, do a talk, and you get the tumbleweed. But our strategy was just every conversation I had with someone, I'd be like, there's a talk in that. Let me get the details. And then we just made target lists, and we just weren't afraid to reach out to people. We did that a lot, and that was the strategy we had for getting talks. And we weren't afraid to go outside of Birmingham either. We wanted local stories, but I think sometimes it's actually good to galvanize the local community by bringing in someone from outside as well.
It's interesting you say you get tumbleweed when you do an open call for speakers, because all I get is white men. Just 99% white men and 1% someone who filled in the wrong form.
That's why we need things like 300 seconds. We need to be supporting, coaching, encouraging people. Everybody's got a talk in them. Okay, they might not be a TEDx, but they might be, something that's worth listening to. And I think we need to encourage that.
Yeah. Is there a distinct difference between meetups and bigger events, though? I think. Yeah, for a bigger conference, you probably don't struggle, but with smaller events, I think that's where you get those tumbleweed.
You would be surprised.
But that I think is really interesting. If you look at things like 300 seconds, that's something I didn't know about at all. And now I do, and that's really handy. So sharing this sort of resource around is really handy, especially since, exactly as Dan says, typical white guy, right? So I shouldn't be standing places talking things. Who needs one more opinion from another 45-year-old white man? So getting more people into things like meetups, they're often a good way to do a talk without quite as much pressure as walking on stage in front of 200 people who've all paid £300 to be there. So practicing talking, getting involved in the idea of public speaking in a slightly more nurturing, slightly less impactful environment might be helpful.
We also had...
Sorry, carry on.
We also had good success with lowering the barrier to entry. So asking someone to get up and do a 25-30 minute talk or longer, there's that kind of barrier to entry. So then we started introducing, okay, this time around we're going to do lightning talks. You only have to talk for 5 minutes. And suddenly you get this kind of yeah, I can do that. And then that's the gateway drug to their bigger talk that we reel them in for later.
Almost becomes a bit of an open mic night. Just people feel a little bit more comfortable with going in and doing that. I think the first couple of talks I did were Petra Kuchar ones. Although with the Petra Kuchar, you do have the added stress of trying to do it in the 20 seconds. So I don't know if that is the best intro to speaking, but it is certainly a good one because the audience is smaller as well. I think you can vary the topics a bit more. I found the first Petra Kuchar I did, I went way too highbrow. I tried to really make myself look clever, and it was just an awful talk. Whereas the second one I did, I talked about children's books, and I absolutely loved it. It was just such a natural thing to do. I wasn't trying to look clever. I just talked about something I was passionate about, and trying to help people get to that point where they're not trying to do something clever. They're trying to do something that they're passionate about is key to unlocking a really good speaker who's confident at doing it.
Yeah, what's interesting about that from my point of view is it's relatively easy to talk to someone about that if you know them already, if there's already a personal relationship there. But if you're running a meetup, you might know 25% of the people there or 50% of the people there, but it's others that you want to encourage into it. But I mean, be friends with everyone is maybe one way to do that, but that's quite a lot of work. And I don't know how else to encourage people to get involved. Maybe other people do.
Well, as people who are kind of well established in the tech scene, I think we need to have a responsibility to, at the events we are at, to look out for the people who are new or look a bit hesitant, and kind of just to say to them, hi, I'm whoever I am, and it's really good to see you here. Do you know anybody? Just put some time in to the next generations, because they're the ones who are going to keep this thing going. Indy, you haven't said an awful lot yet. Have you done talks and kind of stuff that you think? What would you like to do more of?
Well, I was actually just thinking about what everyone was saying, and one of the things that occurred to me is that there probably are enthusiastic individuals out there somewhere trying to set up a talk, but they haven't got the right tools or the right encouragement. And they could be people who could be folded in as people to do talks or help organise these kind of events. And it brings to mind because I had someone at my who worked for me try and set one up a year or two ago, and I think they struggled with all sorts of things, but they had some passion, they had some enthusiasm, and I just think actually maybe if that person could have been connected into the wider community like this, like being able to talk to people like yourselves who have run these events, there would have been some encouragement, some advice, and I'm wondering how many people out there are trying to do this, and because they're not visible, they're missing out on this. And actually, one of the comments as well further down, because that's the other part of this as well. One of the comments someone's made is practical events, and tech people don't tend to be extroverts and want to go up and talk. That's a smaller subset of a small community anyway, and actually maybe having meetups where it doesn't feel like a talk, where it's more a practical, collaborative, more like a workshop type session, because I've got people that I've managed who they'd be quite good, but if you told them to go do a talk for 5 minutes, they wouldn't want to do it. They'd be terrible at it. They'd be nervous at it. But if you just asked them to go help a couple of other junior people out, they'd be great. So maybe there's two bits I've kind of tangled up. But one is there's people out there with the enthusiasm who might not be getting the right advice or mentorship or know about the rest of they won't know that there's a Birmingham calendar, and then there's other people who would you're never going to get them to do that, and they need a different approach.
We've helped quite a lot of people set up their own events, whether that is a new speaking event or new exhibition, and I think that's largely come from people knowing that that's a thing that we can help with. We put it on our website, not that that's a particularly easy way to find that stuff out, but because of the way that our community is running, because myself and Luke and the rest of the team are very personable, people have kind of known to ask us that thing. So they've come to us and said, look, we're thinking of doing this event. Have you got any pointers? And we'll sit down and have a coffee with them and go through it and help them sort of decide on venues in Birmingham that might suit it, the right nights of the week to pick to make sure it's not, lost in the ether with other things. And there's been a few like that. So I guess if we can find a way to harness that a bit more, harness ourselves and be more public about that being an option for people new to the scene, that's probably a good way to encourage the next generation. It certainly worked for us, and I think we can do more in that space.
Ooh, we actually have a question from Twitter. James, do you mind asking said question?
Yes, of course. So this is a question we had from a bit earlier when we were talking about kind of visibility of meetups and how people can find the ones they're interested in. Maria on Twitter asks, is there a shared calendar for Brum Tech events? If so, where can I find it? I want to hand this question to Stuart. this seems right up your alley.
This feels like a question from me. The answer is yes, but at the moment there's a technical issue with it which needs fixing. And I've been having various conversations with people about how we fix that. Shout out to Dave Evans. But yeah, it's at calendar.birmingham.io. And it's backed by a Google Calendar, which you can subscribe to. So even though there's not anything in it at the moment, the instant it starts getting repopulated, it will show up in your calendar if you want it to. So and because it's a Google Calendar, there are RSS feeds or what have you as well. But the place where it is calendar.birmingham.io.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks, James.
Thanks.
Well,
That's good.
you know what? It's time to talk about the dark subject. Well, there are two dark subjects, and I'm going to avoid one of them if I can, but I really want to ask because I know it's going to trigger some people. We're in 2021. We've lived through a life-defining pandemic, and there is all the conversations around the world. For example, Israel and Tel Aviv have started doing in-person events. There are places in the US that have started it. And we've been discussing behind closed doors about, so how would we do a hybrid event so we can be safe for people that want to be safe and in person for people that want to be in person. But let's think about the last, oh God, blooming heck, it is nearly 18 months. Jesus Christ. How has the pandemic affected the events you've been attending and the communities you've been growing? So, Keji, you said it's been the greatest 18 months of Product Tank. I know you haven't been directly running it, but how have you seen it grow?
So, it's, as I said, the ability to attend an event and not have the barrier of work, home life, travel, transport to the event, getting home, I think has really opened up the ability for people to join. And also because you can join events from anywhere. And also the speakers can be from anywhere. We've taken advantage of that really and seen audiences from Europe, from the States sometimes. So I think what's good about that is that it has been the most consistent. It's easier to run. You don't have to worry about finding venues and refreshments and a sponsor to pay for all that. You just kind of, there you go, you're online. So in that sense, it's been probably a better organizing experience for the organizers. But I think everyone is definitely missing the community and the person-to-person community aspects of it. But yeah, it's been the most consistent 18 months the events had. So it's not, risen and fallen with what's going on in people's lives and that kind of thing. And it's had more consistent attendance. The fact that those events are recorded, what the team have been noticing is even if attendance isn't massive, the views that are happening afterwards, they're seeing that kind of the views coming in as well. So that's always good to see.
Okay. Has anybody else got anything to weigh in on that one? Because I know, well, from the Fusion side of things, we've had the wonderful thing of, well, to be brutally honest, nobody seems to want to give 2 hours of their evening to sit down and listen to some tech talks, where we used to have a consistent 100 to 150 people rocking up to listen to a wide variety of subjects. We get between 20 and 40 people actually sitting down and listening to the talks. So we've seen it's been great to see it consistent, not going to lie. But it's been a little bit of but so many people said they loved us. So how do we fix that? How do we get people to actually want to engage in this weird YouTube-only world?
We don't. We get everyone vaccinated, then we can go back to getting together again. Is how we fix it.
Yeah, but when we get back together this time, we want tea, prosecco, cake, not beer and pizza. Okay, if you want to encourage women and other minorities and non-binary people to come to your events, then provide something that doesn't say we want men to come, please.
I think I mean, some of that is because a lot of things are organised by men for men. But something we were talking about before this even started is venues in town, and it's relatively easy to say everyone get together in a pub because the pub is there on a Tuesday evening and it's open. If you want to organise a get together in an evening somewhere that isn't a pub, it's quite hard to do because you've got to actually organise it and book that place and get someone to open it up for you and convince them not to charge you money. Or there are some things, you know, there are cafes and so on which can be done. Yeah. I honestly don't know how many of them are open until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Maybe the answer is all of them, and I should.
Well,
know
that's
more
why
about
I
this.
started my list of cafes, my independent cafes, Stuart, because on my website, because I knew there was a need for places for people to go that didn't involve alcohol.
Well, can I politely ask if you drop that into the chat so I can share it with the chat? And because that sounds like a really good reference to share.
I'd like to. I can't get into the chat, so I'll maybe share on
Twitter. Put it in the
after.
private chat. I'll put it into the chat for you. Don't worry.
Cool.
Thank you.
Jeez, I keep finding things. I keep going. Here's this be a good thing, and Paulie's like, "Yeah, I've done that already." It's good, which is brilliant.
Hang on, isn't this your response to the calendar every time?
Shut up, We're working on it. There have been issues.
Is anybody thinking about continuing online events post-pandemic?
Yes.
Yeah.
I am a developer advocate, so my job is literally public speaking. I work for a startup where there's 10 of us, so I've got to cover every bloody place possible on the globe wherever somebody's bloody interested. So yes, because I'm trying to encourage people so that I can attend places in Southeast Asia while still being sat in a pub in Birmingham.
Sorry, I meant running from a running perspective. Are you still going to run online events?
I've been encouraging people to run them as hybrid as much as possible. Hence the conversation we had before this with so how do you get hybrid people? Well, it's actually quite easy. And then I got told all you need to do is be able to point the camera correctly.
I think the idea of hybrid events, I've not seen that many people pull off a hybrid event successfully that was something small. I mean, yes, if you're doing a big thing on stage with pre-rigged camera points and you've got a bunch of budget and you spend 6 months organizing it, then live streaming it at the same time is perfectly doable. Doing a meetup in the upstairs room of a cafe or in someone's office or something is harder to do. Now, some people have done it. So Brum.js have done that, for example. It's at least been recorded, even if not live streamed, or it could be live streamed. And I think we could do with doing more of this and understanding it. But I think the idea of hybrid events is a good one, but I'd like to see more people be successful at it so we learn how.
So the way that we changed in for the pandemic, we were very mindful that the thing that we love about events is actually getting together with people and that community aspect of it. And we delayed what was going to be a conference last year. We kicked the can down the road until we just said we're not going to be doing it. But we were still very reluctant to try something like a StreamYard or a Zoom call because that we weren't sure what we would get out of that. And we eventually happened upon what we felt was the right format for us, which was a pre-recorded one. So what we've been doing for our online events is sort of an 1.5 hour long video of about between 6 and 10 talks that are quick fire. And it was completely based on a Nintendo Direct. And I was just like, that format allows you to add a lot of polish to it. You can add transitions, you can add proper introductions, you can give the speaker their moment on screen. That felt like it really worked for us. And then we coupled that with the fact that we had this chat that because we were not hosting anything, we could actually get involved with. And we've had 300 people in our chat for our live events. The last event that we did, we sold 1,500 tickets to universities. All of that stuff we'd have never been able to do before. And that's completely changed our mindset on what we are going to do moving forward, where we will now have our live events as normal, but we will probably have 2 events per year that are in that pre-recorded format because it just works so well for us. It also meant that we could invite speakers that we would never normally ask. There's speakers in America that we've always would have loved to fly over, but we could not justify the cost of doing that we can now ask. And they can send us a pre-recorded video. They don't even need to be anywhere on a set date, although we do a live Q&A. That format is just such a nice, new, interesting change for us that it will be with us moving forward, and unless once things open up, people decide they don't want it.
I mean, very briefly, on a smaller scale but similar, Midlands Indies here in the city, they do a thing where their community get together and watch collectively at the same time a talk, and it's not even a talk done for their event. It's something from the Game Developer Conference or something like that. But it's this kind of shared community watching a talk experience. And if you're doing that, I mean, as you say, you're doing a talk specifically for that event, so it's something new. But still, that collective watching thing, I think, is interesting.
The collective watching has been really nice. It's something that I really wasn't prepared for how just enjoyable that would be, to have everybody in the chat, engaging, chatting, talking to the speakers who are on screen, and then being able to actually reply is so interesting and different. And it feels a little bit more accessible as well. Like, I think when you do a live event and you all sit there in a room in total silence listening to one person, when it's online and it becomes that conversation, it's just a totally different feel. It's not the same, and it's different, and I really, really like that.
I've never considered the whole Netflix party for a talk. It's an intriguing way of doing it. Hannah, take notes. Okay, so we've talked about a couple of different formats for online events. Has there anybody seen any other good formats or any ways that these online events have communicated? So I've had the pleasure of speaking at a few, but even though they're in similar disciplines, there has been no crossover of promotion and actually helping others to access alternative speakers. It's been very siloed. Anyone seen any positive versions of that rather than the negative ones I've seen?
Well, I try to make sure when I publish digital WM news that I pick up everything that's going on that's related to obviously my niche, but small charities and digital and tech. So I'm scraping, trying to scrape Eventbrite. If someone knows how to do that, please tell me. And surfacing things that are relevant to the development of tech for good in the Midlands. So like Combined Authority, for example, is now looking for somebody to help run the Coalition for Digital Inclusion. So I put that in my newsletter. I'm recruiting for two digital literacy project workers. That's in the newsletter. If I see jobs that people in the charity sector, digital jobs might be interested in, that goes in the newsletter. And that's not, I don't charge for that. That's just me doing like a public service. But hopefully, and I know I've saved at least one person from leaving Birmingham because they found a job through my newsletter. So yay for newsletters.
Remind me to talk to you about scraping Eventbrite.
Okay.
The calendar has wandered in that direction from time to time, so I know something about it. So.
I shook my head initially at people who are doing good things to encourage that sort of collaboration and sharedness of it. But actually, the Space in Birmingham have been running a mentorship program for arts organisations that are trying to pivot to digital, which I've been part of for the past 6 months. And that's been a really great program because that has been a lot of people who have digital event knowledge, going and talking to arts festivals across the UK. Like my 3 mentees have been Scotland and Wales, and just sharing knowledge, sharing how we did it, and coaching them to get into the mindset of what they potentially need to change to run an event in a digital way. And these are big festivals as well. And I think that the Space has done a really good job of curating that and making that a thing.
Okay. I'm going to circle back to the title of this one, which is community collaboration. And I'm just wondering, with the in the next few months, there is going to be this slow ramp up to going back to in-person stuff. Eventually, somebody's going to think it's a good idea and find a way of doing it that isn't going to rub people the wrong way and do it. So how do we strengthen the communication between these online communities and all the nascent real world communities that lie beneath them, and get them to actually work together to actually, be better? how do we encourage people who've been doing this for a hobby and in isolation from their office, like most of us, to actually just chat about stuff and getting them to go, oh, we may know a good person to speak there for you. Oh, I've heard about this stuff that you're doing. Do you want to be promoted at our event, sort of thing? How do we encourage that sort of behavior? How do we make it a normal behavior for people rather than, why would I help you promote your thing? It doesn't help me.
I don't think anyone thinks like that.
No.
There's
Devil's advocate.
The devil doesn't need any advocates. Have you looked out the window? But yeah, I don't think there's anyone, certainly not here, who's saying, yeah, I could help you, but I'm not going to because I want you to suffer. It's more that you haven't got time, or you're not asked. And as I mentioned earlier, there's things like the meetup of Meetups Slack and things like that. And we've had conversations around this kind of thing before to get some people together. But what these things founder on is time. So I wonder whether, instead of trying to come up with a kind of an organization that can manage this sort of thing, because other people have tried stuff in the city. You've got things like Silicon Canal or what have you, who partially were set up to do this kind of role of coordinating things or whatever. And you've got things like Birmingham Tech Week and so on, where they suggested that maybe coordinating stuff might be a good idea. But maybe instead of trying to create an organization, we just have a list of people's names, which says, if you're interested in knowing something about this, here's someone who knows. If you're interested in, getting 10,000 people to show up your meetup, talk to Dan. If you're interested in maybe something along those lines. So if people are happy to have their names on a list, which is somewhat public, and then here are people you can reach out to, and it is okay for you to reach out to them. You don't need a personal introduction to them. They're happy to have a conversation with you about it.
Absolutely.
I like talking about this stuff. Right? Someone asks me a question, I'll answer it.
Yeah. I think I completely agree with what you said, Stuart. I think dropping those barriers to all of us doing that because of time and life, everything, and having that burden of responsibility or ownership for keeping that whatever that thing is going is reduce that barrier to entry, make it self-serve. So one of the things we did with speakers is we always ask speakers, we're part of a wider network, that would you be interested in speaking at other Product Tank events that aren't ours? And if there was a yes, they went on a list and all of the other organizers had access to that list. And sometimes they might reach out and go, really want to talk to this speaker, can you do me an intro? And that, again, the burden of responsibility there is super low. So, how do we categorize the various things that people might want to know and start to build out a list that's really easy to just add to and easy to self-serve with?
I think we also need to start having more fun. I mean, I'm a very serious person myself, and I like to be earnest and get involved in the tech and stuff. But actually, kicking back, watching a film together, eating popcorn, and chatting about whatever's on screen might be another way of just let's chill a bit and just enjoy each other's company without having to prove that we know more than the next person.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of the responsibility also lies on the people who want to do the thing. As Stuart said, we're kind of open books. I'm happy to have any conversation that anybody wants, but I'm not going to go looking for those conversations. Like, they need to come to me. And a lot of people have messaged us and said, as I said earlier, and said, I'm thinking of doing this thing. Can you help me set it up? And we've kind of gone and done that. So I think the worst thing is when people are head down and they just go plow ahead and do their thing, when so many other people could have helped contribute to that thing and help them grow, not from a selfish point of view of we all want our name on that thing, but from you want to do a thing, that's amazing. How can we make you achieve what you think this should be? And encourage people to have those conversations. When we started BDF, even though we had event experience, we went to all the other big design festivals in the country and said, what advice have you got? We had maybe 2 or 3 conversations with them. What pitfalls did you run into? We also collaborated with them and made sure we didn't step on their toes, because we didn't want to put on a festival that's in close proximity with Design Manchester that ran along the same theme. That would be a rubbish thing to do for somebody who's already spent 5 years curating it and building that platform for then someone to try and steal that thunder. So just constant conversation and you're responsible for the conversations you have, and you need to be the one going and having them. So it's, whilst we can be as open as possible, people will need to also realise that the onus is on them a little bit to take the initiative.
Okay. Well, we haven't got much longer left, so I think I'll ask just a general, because you know what, it'd probably be good to end on a high note. There's been a lot of discussions that have pointed out some negatives, some of the positives, plenty of topics around collaboration and trying to grow it. So what are the things that you think are the strengths of the existing communities we have? What are the things that we love about the individual communities? Even not the Birmingham community as a whole, because, well, as we've discussed, not everybody knows everything. We've in this evening, I've discovered 3 different events I didn't know of before. Just putting it out there. So what are those strengths? Anybody want to take that one? Okay.
Right. Well, I'll jump in.
Indy.
Haven't spoken for a while. Just have a nice conversation about it. No, I mean, one of the things I think is really good is Birmingham is not a really big place, but there does seem to be a lot of different tech events and some quite specific tech events. Like, as you said, Mike, I'm learning about loads today, and I was like, and actually, we talked about your calendar quite a bit, Stuart, but it's one of those things where I go, actually, I really, really wish it was working right now. I was like,
almost as much as I do, man. Believe me.
Because and I think that's what's nice. It seems like there's room for a lot of this, and based on some of the things that Dan said that he's helped people set up, it seems like there's a lot of interest for these, and we've talked about how can we help, and I think some of the ideas have been really good, but the fact that again, I said it earlier, the fact that you can even bring a couple of people who run events like yourselves together is really good. And Pauline, you mentioned earlier, I was sitting there here thinking earlier, it's quite a diverse set of speakers we've got on the camera, and that's really nice. And I don't know how reflective that is of all the tech events, but that's good to have seen today.
I think you can blame Hannah for a dogged determination to have a mixed panel from all over the city. But yeah, I
mean, I think I like the fact that we've got a diversity of events. You've got things like fully design oriented things, and you've got a bunch of actual techie things, but then there's stuff joining up art and technology stuff, so things like Brum Tech Tapas or whatever. And I like the idea that if the damn calendar's working, which it will be soon, I promise, honestly, I mean, the idea of having this thing so everyone could find out what was going on was like purpose number 2 for it. But purpose number 1 was I wanted to be able to say, okay, it's Tuesday night, what's going on? And look at it and go, okay, there's the following 4 or 5 things, which there are. And then I'll just go, oh, that sounds interesting. I've never been to the Birmingham Docker meetup. I'll just walk down to it and see what it's like. And that's exactly what it's for, that sort of serendipitous discovery of things that are going on. So, which is why I need to get it fixed.
And similarly, the event section in Digital WM News is about what's going on that might be of interest to people. FizzPop, when it was open, had a regular slot. Things that were on the Impact Hub, Product Tank, anything I thought might spark or pique the interest of somebody getting into digital or getting into technology, getting their feet wet for the first time from a charity, just to encourage them, because there's so many brilliant things out there, so much imagination, that I wanted to encourage people to, and I still do want to encourage them to go to events and meet people who will help them.
Positive things about the community. I think it's a very honest community. That's what I really like about Birmingham, is just people are honest about what they're doing. No one's trying to oversell their thing. You said at the start that we're quite self-deprecating, and and quite humble, and that can be an issue for discoverability, and especially not just in Birmingham, but from outside it as well. But I think on the flip side of that, it does just create a nice scene. It creates a nice scene that's not got as many egos in as elsewhere. And I do feel like I can genuinely go and speak to pretty much anybody running a thing in Birmingham and have a nice open conversation about that, where people aren't playing their cards close to their chest and they're like, oh, how much money did you make from that event? How much did the event cost? I don't expect a lie or a wave away from those conversations. And I think that honesty helps each community grow, because it allows the others to work out what's achievable and what expectations they can make.
Yeah, I think the low degrees of separation between events or someone in an event is a good thing. So even though we have lots of events, it's a big city, but I feel like, I'd heard about everybody on this call, even though I'd not met everyone on this call, and there's probably a low degree of separation. If I did want to get an intro to someone, I'd quite like that.
Yeah, Birmingham was like 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Bacon. Somebody had to do it. It's going to be me. Okay, so we all have positive things we want to see about the city, and I'm actually somebody who is unfortunately one of the evil people who left Birmingham for a while. Yeah, went and ran hack fronts from Bristol, where I actually, not going to lie, did nothing to help the community at all. And I have been admonished for that repeatedly by certain people, namely my boss. But it's like, I still want to see the communities in Birmingham succeed now that I'm back here, even though I'm considering buggering off again. I still want to see them succeed and grow. Not just the meetups, but the actual underlying communities beneath them. There's quite a vibrant Slack in the Brum Tech Slack. I know that there's a few other like Slacks and Discords and Wii communities in and around the city. Like, I believe Hack the Midlands still has a relatively active Discord, even though the event's been, what was it, 9 months was the last one? 9 months ago?
Yeah. And there's the Brum Inhabitants Discord and things like that. Yeah, there's Birmingham Tech Slack is a good place to be for techie stuff.
Yes. I'm unfortunately not a part of all the other communities, so I can't ask. Please, if anybody's got anything that I should probably go dive into to actually see about helping the community, throw them at me and tell me off. That includes you and Dan. You're welcome to tell me off for that stuff. But so is there any last comments people would like to say about Birmingham and its tech community?
I'd like to say this list of independent cafes is class, Pauline. I have no idea. This is. I mean, I go into all these places a lot. I'm like, I can't believe there's this many places. We should really do a load of meetups in places like this. This is cool.
You'll notice it hasn't been updated since March last year, because what was the point?
But
the list is there for people who want to check it out.
I do miss the original meetups I used to go to. Hydra Hack, where I first met Stuart.
Yeah,
was in York's on New Hall Street before it became a Pret.
Before it shut down, yeah.
But oh, good lord, I'm gonna have to check the list out and see how many of them I actually just go work from these days.
There's like hundreds. I can't believe there's this many. Anyway,
but yes, does anybody have something they want to say this before we call it a night and I can go get some dinner?
I'd like to give a shout out. It's not a Birmingham-based tech initiative, but I think it's important for small charities, and there's lots of them in Birmingham. So that'll be my tenuous link to it, and it's something that's coming from the tech community, and it's going on beta release next month. But it's a way to support small charities with access new donors and boost donations. And I know that a lot of people do support charities, and in the pandemic and other times, tech companies have contacted infrastructure organizations like the Small Charities Coalition to say, we've got something that we can help you with, but they don't come from the knowledge of the end user of charities. But this one actually comes. The COO used to be the CEO of Small Charities Coalition, so he does know what he's talking about, John Barrett. And it's an app called Toucan app, the Toucan, the bird, and on Twitter they're at Toucan Giving. As I say, they're going on beta release next month and a public launch in September. And I think, it's an example of a way of practically supporting small charities that anybody can do, but it's I'd like to see other people. I'd like to see people here supporting it if they can. You can nominate like 3 small charities to support, and then you can change each month to new charities if you want, or stick with the small ones. And like even tiny amounts for small charities makes a big difference. So there you go.
Keji, Dan, do you have any shout out sort of moment you'd like to give in the same ilk?
It's BDF conference next month. So that's online and in person. We've actually going to have a exhibition starting the 16th of August. It's going to be in the Market Hall at the Custard Factory. We've got should be around 100 Birmingham-based artists exhibiting a piece of work around the brief of the creative city. So we'll actually have an exhibition opening night. I think that will be on for 2 days, and it will also be available online. And then we've actually got the conference itself, which we're still gathering speakers for because it's been all over the place. The country opening up was almost as bad as it closing down, because it meant that everybody suddenly decided that they didn't want to speak online. But we've got some amazing speakers for the actual conference itself, which is later on in the week of the 16th of August. So yeah, do join us for either or both.
Keji, Stuart, Indy?
I guess I'll just shout out Product Tank. I'm not running it anymore, but I'm still very close to those who are. So it's on last Wednesday of every month, typically.
I don't have any, but I'm looking forward to going to all these meetups, especially the ones in person.
Hey, can I do one more? It's the Midlands Women in Tech Awards. I think I'd be kind of remiss of me not to mention them. Unique opportunity to highlight and recognise the ongoing contribution of women to the tech sector, and that's on the 7th of October, the actual awards, and the information is out there for people who want to support that.
Awesome.
And thanks to you guys for putting this conversation together. Actually, I was feeling a little bit nervous because I think it's probably a good time to admit that I'm partly in Birmingham now. I haven't left yet. I'm in Birmingham right now, but I spend half my time in London at the moment. So I was feeling a little bit anxious that perhaps I didn't have much to contribute anymore, but it's been really great to meet you all and have this conversation. So thanks.
It's been brilliant.
Good to see you, Keji.
Good to see you too.
We've also got a yam yam in the chat, so it still counts. Yes, that's you, Indy. But thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Keji, Dan, Pauline, Stuart, and Indy. And also thank you to James for keeping an eye on stuff for me, because my brain can't do that many things at once. I am pretty stupid. But thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everybody in the chat. We really appreciate it. And hopefully there'll be another one of these at some point in the future. Goodbye.